You've reached Hotel Pacifico, your 5-star destination for BC politicos. Press 4 for room service. Press the star key for your hosts Mike McDonald and Kate Hammer.
Welcome back, guests. Thanks for joining us for early check-in again at Hotel Pacifico. Good to see you, Geoff.
Good morning. We're missing Mike.
Yeah, Mike's taking the day off to mediate a dispute, I understand, between Mr. Snickers and the Dancing Cactus. We wish him well. So we have a special guest today. Welcome back to Hotel Pacifico, Richard Zussman.
Another celebrity visitor.
I've been inspired by Mike McDonald's wardrobe choices, so I tried to wear a nostalgic BC-based t-shirt.
Wow.
So I've got my Terry Fox t-shirt on, inspired by Mike. And I also have to warn you, Kate.
Yes.
The last time that Geoff and I were on political panel together, the other person on it was Kevin Falcon. And so I brought a gift for you. I brought a BC United hat for you, which is now a piece of BC history. Yes. So beware, Kate. Bad things can happen when you end up on panels with Geoff and I.
I didn't know the BCU merch was on Craigslist somewhere. I'll have to take a look.
Well, I think it's in a dumpster somewhere in North Vancouver, Geoff. I think it's where most of it is.
Certainly not allowed to have it if you're a candidate. That's right.
Oh, that's a great hat. I love that hat. Thank you, Richard. Wow, I've never received a gift from a guest. I'm just deeply touched.
I have gifts for everybody today. Kate. I can show you Mike's gift. I went to Elections BC. We know that there are lots of new ridings, right? There are 6 additional ridings. There are 30 plus with new names. There are 72 with new boundaries. So I got Mike his very own Elections BC map for the 2024 BC election. So I've got to make sure that Mike gets this because a lot has changed, and figuring out the difference between all of these places is going to be a bit tricky. So I got him a map. Geoff, I got something for you too, Geoff, but we'll get there in a little bit, I think.
I had the old map on my office for many years. But
I can find you a new one too, Geoff, if you need one.
I feel like that's a lovely gift, Richard. I think Mike's going to feel very seen.
Very thoughtful.
So stick around for the end. I'm so glad to have you, Richard, for the espresso bar. First, we'll do our quick morning check-in just to see where everyone's at today. We've got David Eby starting out in Yaletown, later Richmond and Burnaby, John Rustad's in Penticton and Kelowna, Sonia Furstenau's in Cowichan Bay. Let's go then and look backwards, and let's talk about what happened yesterday on Thursday, because this is going to take some time. There was a lot going on. I'll start with the NDP release of the full platform. I'm going to try and do a kind of summary of some of the biggest hits. And then, Geoff, I'll get you to kind of pull out what you think were sort of the key pieces in this platform. But I've got cutting MSP premiums, adding EA supports to primary classrooms and providing on-site before and after school care, ending the no pet clauses for purpose-built rental housing, new public safety measures, including new police units, new hate crime legislation and transition housing, I think, and then, there was the commitment to look at administrative spending with the health authorities to try and find savings there. Anything else, Geoff, that I missed that maybe jumped out at you, something important in that?
We don't have enough time on 2 or 3 shows to go through everything in this document, which was 60 plus pages. It's very, very long. It speaks to the tremendous amount of work that the NDP team put into it. And David Eby personally, I think it's got his personal stamp on it in a big way. But if I can just break it down slightly for you, I think it really sets the table this way for voters from the NDP's perspective. On the one hand, you have David Eby, who sees himself as order, versus John Rustad, who he classifies as chaos, basically. And Eby's got 5 key commitments. He's saying to people, I am going to help you on your day-to-day living costs, and I've got some proof of that. I'm going to make sure that you have some access to housing. I'm going to build a ton of housing, which my opponent will not. I'm going to work on healthcare problems. I'm going to fight crime, and I'm concerned about the economy. But when you go through the pieces and try to figure out, well, where's Eby, where's Rustad, you've got Eby saying we'll build. We're going to keep ICBC. We're going to keep the reconciliation program. We're going to keep the overdose prevention sites. We're going to keep building new housing. We're going to make sure there's no service cuts. We're going to keep enforcing the gun laws. And you have Rustad saying, actually, I'm going to cancel a ton of this stuff. I'm going to cancel enhanced care, and I'm going to take down ICBC the way it's been for the last few years. I'm going to get rid of DREPA, although he's trying to waffle on that. I'm going to cancel the housing program. I'm going to shut down the overdose prevention sites. I'm going to roll back a number of the healthcare changes, although that's very vague. And I'm not going to enforce the gun laws. And then he throws in his stuff about straws and plastic bags and stuff, which I would call the litter bug bill of rights. So I think we see the contrast set here now, and it's going to be very interesting to understand and watch how the voters respond to what is a very lengthy document with both parties saying we won't, we're not going to balance the budget in our political lifetime.
Richard, I'm wondering what you're thinking, because I think, Geoff summarizes it well, and it's a very lengthy document. And there's a lot of detail in here. And, in contrast to, it's very well thought through policy in general, in contrast to Rustad, who has a really simple message, often with a kind of burn it down or cancel it kind of message. So how does this play as how effective is this as a contrast to John Rustad for the NDP?
Geoff's gift was going to be a plastic straw, but now I know how he feels about that. So this is your actual gift, Geoff. I got you the platform, man. Here
a hard copy.
I got you a hard copy. And I joked with David Eby about this at the event yesterday. He has 3 kids. The risky play to have just one of them on the cover of the platform. And I think Ezra, his older son, is not going to be too happy about it. I think, Kate, you hit it on the head in a way that, these campaigns were running this tight window. People don't know John Rustad, but they understand the conservative brand. And he is running on these very simple promises, which when you look at them are far more complex. The attainability of these things will be very difficult. He rolled out this massive list of infrastructure promises yesterday, in essence, promising every bridge, every SkyTrain that anyone has ever asked for without any path for how do we invest in these projects in terms of capital, right? And where do you even get the workers to build these bridges, to build the SkyTrain? It's far too simplistic, I think, and we're going to see a platform from the Conservatives at some point, and understanding how they're going to do it's going to be interesting. It plays to the piece that Geoff mentioned. There are lots of people out there who get frustrated when they drink their milkshakes with a paper straw and the straw falls apart. But there's a far bigger reason for why government has put in these policies. And I don't think David Eby wants to try to spend any time justifying why we have a policy in place that bans plastic straws and makes you pay for a paper bag when you pick up your fast food. But I think it's now to the surface. So back to the NDP.
Go ahead. Well, it really surfaced a liability for them, though, right? Because I think what happened is, right, like they got called out too, and there was a lot spent on the costing of their platform, right? And actually, they've been called out a lot for how much they're spending. And right now we have John Rustad with a more expensive, more generous tax rebate. We have John Rustad with all these bridges and these tunnels, and it doesn't, the same question doesn't get put to him in the same way. It isn't led. I feel like the Conservatives can get away with these big promises in a way David Eby can't right now.
For sure. And we saw Christy Clark get flat-footed on this in 2017 as well. And, the rest is history, as they say, for Geoff and the gang. And that was something that, Eby was aware of going into this campaign. So when you're an incumbent, you need to sort of paint the picture, because every big flashy new thing you announce, the first thing people say is, why did you not do this before? Why didn't you do this when you were governing? So you need to be tactful in it. You mentioned the rebate being more generous from John Rustad. David Eby really wants to create a wedge there. He has a rebate that will come in right away. Rustad doesn't. Rustad's using that top line number of around $1,700, but that's not until 2029. It's going to take time to build up to that. The tax cut that Eby provides comes quicker. That's in the platform as well. There's a nuanced approach here. It hits those core issues. I think the challenge in covering things like this is you don't see that flashy item, but I understand why Eby didn't do it. Selling the platform, I think, is going to be challenging for Eby because it doesn't have those marquee promises. So he's going to have to go back to that messaging of stability, like you described, order over chaos, Geoff. Like, this is going to be the tack that Eby has to take. Now that he has a document, he can focus in on that and try to target certain issues where he believes Rustad is just not fit to govern.
Well, it's interesting.
If I may,
go ahead,
Kate, I think, I think, and of course, I hope that Rustad made a big mistake by focusing on ICBC. Everybody out there who's trying to get around remembers that ICBC's was on fire, and that David Eby put it out, and that year after year they got rebates and lower auto insurance, which is exactly what the basic theme is. They're going to help you with your daily living costs. And John Rustad says, I want to get back to 2017, and I'll do that as quickly as possible. And I think for a lot of people, that's going to go, hey, maybe that may be a door opener for them to think more about what the rest of the Rust Ed program looks like.
Especially if
Certainly,
you're someone like me who's lived in another province and paid a lot more. Like
well,
when
yeah,
he's
but
sort of,
also
you know,
this is as Richard will attest, is this is David Eby's wheelhouse. I
Yes.
mean, he did that program. He knows it intimately. He implemented it, and he made those savings and delivered them to people personally. So that's not what many other like cabinet ministers could say from that period.
well, this is, I mean, Geoff, I want to pick up on this and I'm getting ahead a little bit in the show, but like, how much in this is this about David Eby kind of putting stuff in the window that punches through, you know, to try and make offerings that people hear, you know, sort of the potential of the future versus undermining the what the Conservatives are putting out? Because I think right now they've been sort of emphasizing more the offering and maybe not doing a good enough job of talking about what might be some flaws in what John Rusted's offering.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to answer directly, but I found when I was reading the document, which is really long, that I feel like I'm having a David Eby experience. This campaign is David Eby's very, very personal and passionately felt agenda for the province. I got the impression a couple of times, though, that he might have been changing a diaper or something and went, yeah, why can't you have pets in every apartment building? Yeah, we should make sure that happens. And so it all gets in there. The pet thing, of course, is very popular, and there's dog
Yes.
photos. There's dog
Yes.
photos everywhere this morning.
Yes.
But
It's a
you
good
know,
one.
it's
Pets are one of those topics. I can say this to you, Richard, you might know this like as a journalist, like when you do a pet story, like it goes for days. People get really animated by their pets. I thought that one was good. Although I was wondering like if they're making hay in the right way yet with
I don't
it.
know if
But
you've ever
and
been in an apartment where the neighbor next door bought a puppy and then went to Florida for 2 weeks and left it locked in or
oh
something.
God,
know,
no, I hope not. Yeah.
Anyway,
Jeff's lived
I don't want to
experience.
get into the pet wars, but
Okay. But it's the straws. The pets are their straws,
yeah,
I think.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else in there? We'll go to the Conservatives for a second, but I just want to give a second to you, Geoff, to talk about like in terms of those voters we know they're trying to get the ears of and connect
Yeah,
with,
two
right?
groups.
Yeah.
We didn't hear much about the seniors. Those are my people, but there's a fair amount in there for seniors, but nothing particularly new or noteworthy. The thing that's really critical is for women, the coverage of menopause treatment. So hormone replacement therapy was not covered. Now it will be. And I think that's a further signal to a lot of important voters that this government cares about them and is trying to make it easier.
Absolutely. All right. Let's move then to the Conservatives. Let's take a minute. I mean, Richard, you went there naturally. There's so much to talk about. But so these big promises, particularly, I want to start with just on transportation and just the slew of the expansion of promising to fund TransLink for 2 years, which I think the Council of Mayors actually said thank you for that. The expansion of the SkyTrain, building bridges. I can't even list all the places there are bridges. Expansion of highways. Like, are there voters out there, like, you know, I'm thinking particularly commuters who like, you know, that's all it's going to take because they're probably a little resentful of the amount of time they're spending in gridlock every day?
For sure. It's classic blacktop politics, but you sort of have to break it down. Like these are issues that we have covered for years and decades. Like go back to the Massey and the idea that John Rustad is saying, oh, I'm going to review the Massey replacement. And maybe we don't do this immersed tunnel, which is something that's approved by the mayors on both sides. It's something approved by the Tawasin First Nation. So could he really go back to a bridge, something that has been ruled out? There are environmental assessments that would be failed because of it. He says he's going to do whatever's quickest, but it's strange to bring this issue back, especially because people that sit in that traffic every day at the bridge say, why, or every day at the tunnel say, why is the bridge not here yet? The Patello, another one. They've looked at this idea of 6 lanes. New Westminster doesn't want it. The bottlenecks would be atrocious. Sure, we should think about ways to move people through the region, but these issues have been debated and analyzed, and it's going to be curious under scrutiny whether these projects hold up. But as you described it, there's promises for Kelowna, there's promises for the Peace region, there's promises for Kamloops all across the province saying big infrastructure projects. But it comes back to the point I made earlier. Who's going to build it? How much is this going to cost? And I think it's important to have projects that keep people working, but we're already struggling to keep up. And there are other priorities, housing, key, where workers are going to be required. And there's a lot of crossover when you're doing these infrastructure projects in all of that. And finding those resources will be challenging.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm going to
I would just say that
quick. Yep.
underlying all of these issues is TransLink side is that increasingly
Yes.
people are not driving. And that's why fuel tax is going down, and that's why there's financial problems, and also the commutes are brutal, which is why people are working from home. So these are things that really count and have to be fixed somehow.
Guess, have you ever had the experience of looking at your energy bill and seeing a weird spike you can't explain? The problem in my house is by the time we see the spike, it's long enough ago that we're a bit baffled at how to explain it. And if you care at all about optimizing your home energy use, which, let's face it, is kind of all of us these days, it can feel like a missed opportunity. Which is why presenting sponsor TELUS is launching Smart Energy, a global-first solution that helps Canadians manage their home energy consumption more effectively, saving up to 15% on their energy bills and reducing their environmental footprint, all through one simple app. To further benefit the environment, TELUS is planting 4 trees per year on behalf of each Smart Energy subscriber. For more information and to explore how much you can save every year with Smart Energy, visit TELUS.com/smartenergy.
I'm going to move us along to Milking the Data, brought to you by BC Dairy. Farmers need guaranteed access to water to feed BC. So this is fresh data we are getting from Polaris Strategic Insights. This is the first data set we're going to have incorporating some polling that happened after the radio debate. And I'm going to give you the top line now. We've got 43% conservative, 41% NDP, 10% Green, and 5% some other independent. So it's a pretty consistent, I think it shows something kind of locking in. And Geoff, I'm curious from your standpoint, because we've now seen, after sort of months and months through the calendar year of this sort of, runaway train that was the Conservatives, and then sort of as BC United faded away into the good night, sort of more trajectory there. Are we seeing now that there's maybe something that's been saturated within the electorate now that these numbers have been, I'm going to call them pretty steady for multiple weeks now?
Yeah, well, in the absence of some unexpected event, which of course always happens during a campaign, it's really down to turnout. I don't see too many undecided people left there. I think we're finally seeing that the Conservatives have exhausted their potential voter pool. By uniting just about everybody who's got a beef with David Eby's administration. David Eby's campaign has looked and sounded good. The execution of the events has been good and everything else. I think that will be reflected on the ground machinery as well. And so Mike spoke very interestingly, I thought, the other day about sort of Corey Tenaik on this show about what you would be doing as a strategist on the Conservative side to make sure you try to maximize your vote, because they have a lot of ridings, as Richard will explain to us, I'm sure, that they got a ton of votes. They don't have any problem. So they can take experienced organizers and so on and shift them where they think they've got a problem. So this debate is going to be very important, because that's the place where most people would see a mistake if it occurs.
Richard, would you agree with that? Like, is the debate going to be kind of a key point where we see whether there's any more shift within the electorate?
Yeah, I'm contractually obligated to say it will, because we hope people tune into Global BC and watch it. I wonder, I think this is a very strange electorate this time around. It's disengaged. We're hearing all sort of anecdotal stories. One that I keep repeating that gets a big laugh line is a candidate went to the door, asked them who they're voting for. She said, "You don't have to worry about it. I know who I'm voting for. I'm voting for Kamala Harris." And the candidate said, "Oh, so are you part of Democrats abroad?" And she goes, no, I grew up here. I'm from here. And they informed her that you can't actually vote in that election, but you may want to consider New Democrats. So it's one of those things that there's an electorate that is, I think, disconnected from what's happening here. But I want to hope the debate matters, because you do get an opportunity to hear some policy pieces, but you also get an opportunity to see how someone steps up in a moment when they're pressured on issues. You see whether they have that resiliency we want to see in a premier, whether they have that ability to think on their feet, to analyze issues. So I hope that it's going to make a difference. I'm less optimistic, I guess, than I have been in the past around the impact of debates, because there's a fragmented electorate out there. But to Jeff's point, I think the New Democrats have an incredibly efficient vote. So if they're hitting at 41%, they're going to get there. They're going to be efficient in their vote in the places that matter. And Kate, you mentioned Conservatives moving around the province. We're not sure what their machinery is yet. We know that there are Conservatives piling into this province from other places in the country to help. Federal Conservatives see this as a crucial race to show strength for Pierre Poilievre. So they're putting people here. But do they have that knowledge of the neighborhoods? Do they have the data even to understand where they need to pull the vote, where they need to be efficient to win all of those key swing ridings in Metro Vancouver and on central northern Vancouver Island to get them over that majority number. That's never been tested. We don't know a lot about this party. So that's obviously the big thing I'll be watching as we sort of key into debate and post-debate.
Well, can I ask you, Richard, because I know you're moving around with the candidates and with the campaigns, and this is something we had a longer conversation with Mike yesterday about, was sort of like, this is the big question. Like, how much are the Conservatives going to be able to translate these poll numbers to on the ground, riding by riding ground game? And I'm wondering if you're seeing any signs as you move around about what's the state of that ground game for the Conservatives? You know, who are they bringing out? How are they who are they bringing out to events? How are they mobilizing? How's that looking?
The Conservative events are so challenging, Kate. It's a very different campaign. The NDP has a bus. They go to well-orchestrated events. Geoff described it. There's a professional look to it. The Conservative feeling is very different. It's even hard to understand where they're going and what their events are. They don't have a media bus. They'll tell us a few hours in advance that they may be in Kamloops that evening, or they may be in Cranbrook the next day, and getting to those events are challenging. They've had some crowds, and my expectation is they will have a big rally in Surrey, which will have big crowds near the tail end of the campaign. But I do wonder whether they have that ability to pull out not just voters, but supporters as well. So there is a big difference there. They don't have that sort of institutional memory, the knowledge that is needed. You know, we long argued the advantage BC United seemingly had was organization. And when they folded, there's a lot of people in that organization that did not go over to the Conservatives. Some did, sure, but a lot of them didn't. So these people that are coming to help Kate are people from outside of the province. And then, yes, there's a groundswell. We're feeling it. There's people here frustrated with the NDP. They're ready to vote, but do they show up at events? Do they knock on doors? Do they make phone calls? We just don't know.
Wow.
And so I'd like to just say, Kate, that I'm curious, I've raised this before, but there's a vast small C conservative ecosystem of social media platforms, YouTube channels, news shows, all the way from very sophisticated high-end academic ones like The Hub, all the way down to BC Proud, which has been around for years. BC Proud's been critical of the NDP for years, uses terms like weak leadership, which is what you heard Rastad saying to EB during the radio debate. And those people are engaged, hundreds of thousands of them in case of BC Proud. What we don't know is whether they would make a plan to get to the poll, because we don't know how many of them even live in BC. A chunk of them may live in Alberta. So this is, I think, a big test for the Conservatives, whether or not this very, very important part of the population will get there. And I just want to say things that when Rastad says things like vaccine or, plastic straws or whatever, then all of the left, all of my friends, we all start, and me, we wring our hands and go, oh, that's a dog whistle, what a guy, it's terrible. But he's actually just, I think, saying to people, hey, I worry about vaccines too. And really, who among us doesn't? None of us would volunteer to put something bad into our kids, of course, right? And so that whole group of people, maybe our neighbors and so on, whether they make a plan and decide to get to the polls based on what they're hearing and all this thing is an unknown quantity right now. And that's a big challenge for the Liberals, because those people turn up in polling, but whether they turn up at the polls is a different question.
The Liberals or the Conservatives?
Conservatives. Yeah,
no, fair
well,
enough.
They sure didn't want to be liberal. They don't want to be liberal anymore. That EB Trudeau alliance, holy smoke, we don't want that.
Well, it's been a fast change, in fairness, Geoff. Liberal, BC United, and Conservatives. Okay, I'm going to move us along. Our topic of the day, and I want to round us out just with talking about what do the leaders need to do? What does David Eby need to do? What does John Rastad need to do as we're coming into this home stretch, this last half of the election period? So I'll stay with you, Geoff. David Eby in particular, I think the other thing we're seeing with some of the Polera data is there is some tightening up in terms of the favorables for John Rastad, but it's still very clearly advantage David Eby. And is that something he can leverage in this last half, that he's still kind of the guy who's more liked, the guy who's more the believable premier at this stage?
Well, I'm a bore on this point, but I'm going to say it again. When he says in his letter to voters at the top end that I see you, I hear you, he emphasizes that he's distant from people. And I know that in certain, to me anyway, I know that terminology is used in other quarters to say, I understand with you, or I stand with you, I have your back, all this kind of terminology. But we want someone who's with us, who is us. And I think he can show that more by pointing to the many people on his very talented front bench who can prove that in life.
I wonder if there's a generational piece there. That's interesting, Geoff. Sorry, yeah. Just because
I,
it's such a shorthand with kind of the millennial set, right?
well,
It's that
it's,
like, yeah,
to me, it has the feeling of liking somebody on Facebook, or, I share your pain, or I'm so sorry for your loss. It's got a rote feel to it that I think is a bit risky. So I think that there's a whole bunch of other people who have a higher or a very, very understandable and well-established ability to connect on that front, who are also on his team, who are also going to deliver these things. And he would show strength, not weakness, by pointing to them.
great. Richard, any advice for the NDP and David Eby?
Yeah, mutuals are what the kids call it, Geoff, on social media. Those
Okay.
connections that
Yeah,
exist.
thanks for the translation. I need a whole glossary.
I think, and Geoff hit a really important point. I was at an event earlier this week at the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. That is an uncomfortable room for David Eby to be in. His team had been presented data from the Mustel Group coming into it, knowing the business community was frustrated with them. And he struggled when working through the room before the event to have conversations. And I spoke to a number of business leaders afterward who said, we're here to help. Like, he can be, as Geoff described, one of us too. And he doesn't want to go there. There was hope. He paints this picture. He has a wife who's a family doctor. He has 3 kids. 2 of them are in the school system. He can resonate with people around those real challenges that people are feeling in Metro Vancouver around cost, around access to childcare, around, the school system. And he's always struggled. I found, Kate, interviewing him over the years, he's getting better at articulating some of the more personal stuff. And John Horgan was always good at that. John Horgan could always go back to that moment when he was in grade 9 and he almost got thrown out of high school. And a basketball coach grabbed him by the collar and said, you can get through this. And that resonates with people. And David Eby is struggling to articulate how his shared experience, and we'll see, maybe that's where they go in the debate. Maybe that's where they go on the trail, but he hasn't gotten there yet. And I think that's effective in politics. Exactly what Geoff said, to show people, I am one of you. I am not leading you. I am with you. And because he can tell that story, he's lived it, but he's struggling to get there.
It's interesting. Listening to the radio debate, Richard, one of the things I really took away was how each of the leaders uses an anecdote. And I think David Eby leverages an anecdote as a data point, and John Rustad can leverage an anecdote as a story. It's way more in the emotion. And I think you're right. Like, I think we're seeing some improvement from David Eby on his ability to do that, because it's not that he's not a warm person with a kind of a good, relatable personal story, but it's just I can't believe how quickly I could kind of go like, oh, lawyer. Sometimes when he's speaking, let's pivot then to go ahead.
No, I want to go to
let's go to the conservatives. Let's go to John Rustad. And I want to say, because I'll start with you, Richard, because it's like, we talk a lot about, okay, like the conservatives, it seems like, okay, keep doing what you're doing. And can I put it as maybe, is it keep doing what you're doing, or is it something they're doing? Is it something they're not doing that maybe allows them to kind of continue on the trajectory?
The thing that's evolved with me with John Rustad is his precision in language. And you sort of described that, and you saw that in the debate. He is very, when he speaks, he does it in very precise tones. I think people like that. I think they've gotten tired of politicians explaining things over time and pivoting and not really focusing on the question that's asked. So I think there's a precision in language that John Rustad is taking advantage of. I think one of the challenges he's going to run into is the voters are going to start making those assessments around, are they comfortable with his candidates? Are they comfortable with him? I don't believe he's going to spend a lot of time in the debate trying to justify his previous stance on the impact of human-caused climate change and the role that we play in British Columbia. I don't think he's going to spend a lot of time trying to explain his candidates, saying all sorts of crazy things about what's happening in the United States, what happens when you put vaccines in your body. But there's a voter out there, I think that centrist voter who we know determines the election outcomes in this province, that are still worried and wondering about those things. And I'm not sure he goes there. I'm not sure it's to his advantage, but there's an expectation, I think, from voters, because if he can articulate that, that may be the difference between him winning and losing. But I'm not sure that that's where he wants to go. So I see that ability for him to be there It's just his team, I think, is telling him, stay away from this stuff, because those could be pretty significant traps when, as you describe, he's doing the things he needs to do. He has taken a party from 2% to 44%. This is a pretty remarkable story, no matter what happens on election night, rising up and trying to take this center stage when he's long been a guy who's been backstage.
Guests, I want to talk to you today about the employees of Fortis BC and community giving. Fortis BC's commitment to building and maintaining positive community relationships extends throughout BC to every town and city where the more than 2,700 employees of Fortis BC live and work. Last year, Fortis BC supported more than 300 grassroots initiatives in communities across the province. This includes organizations like the Trail Wildlife Association, Nelson Search and Rescue, Powell River Salmon Society, Fort Nelson Community Literacy Society, Squamish Nation Youth Powwow, Surrey Libraries, and the Caledon Volunteer Fire Department. In addition, through their Community Giving Awards, Fortis BC provides funding to groups for their work meeting community needs. Organizations like the North Okanagan Good Food Box will use the support to provide more families and seniors in need with fresh, healthy produce from local farmers. Last year, Fortis BC invested $6.7 million in BC communities through donations and sponsorships, a 49% increase over 2022, reflecting their commitment to supporting community needs where the employees of Fortis BC live and work. Fortis BC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast.
All right. Now we need to grab a coffee. Okay, so
And I got a huge foaming latte here for a lot of people who are my friends. And of course, I'm partisan on this, but I do think the people who've been putting together the NDP campaign have been doing an outstanding job. And technically, it looks terrific. It feels terrific. The platform was very detailed. It shows a ton of work and passion by everybody there. So big latte for them.
thanks. Richard.
Yeah, big latte for those independents fighting out there. I think this continues to be one of the big stories of the election. You mentioned it, Kate, 5% in the polls now. I hear from them a lot. They feel that they're being ignored a little bit. So a big coffee to many of them, especially those in the Okanagan, former BC United candidates, Ashley Ramsey, Michael Humer, Stephen Johnston, Wendy Yuen here, Jackie Lee. There are so many of them who are out there without infrastructure, without a campaign team. Broadly, they have their local people, sure. So big coffee to them. And also, I'm here at the YWCA downtown. This is where I'm staying during the campaign in Vancouver. It's a non-profit hotel in downtown Vancouver. It has been incredible. All the profits they make at this hotel goes directly to the services the YWCA provides. So a big coffee to them, and a thank you for making this a nice stay in Vancouver. Little town guy from Victoria, being in the big city can be tough sometimes. So
A bit bewildering for somebody from, yeah.
We're glad to have you, Richard. We're glad to have you. And I love the glass raise to the YMCA. We're a positive bunch today because I'm also going to stick with it. I'm going to raise my latte. And I just want to say, and we didn't get to talk about it, but I love the NDP's promise on before and after school care. If you have struggled to find care for your kids, you are like, oh, thank God. The possibility too of having it on site at the school is huge. And I'm not going to policy wonk too hard, but there are, like Sonia Firstenau's point about staffing is fair, but actually the split shift element and how you can recruit in light of that is very true. And there's major cost efficiencies in that, including also a capital opportunity when you have it on site at the school. So I'm just going to end my nerd out there and say, like, this is like a beautiful foamy latte. And I'm super excited about this promise from the NDP as a working mom. And I think, especially in Surrey, where I know there's an oversubscription of childcare and schools, I think that has political potential. So
big time. And I told a story on the radio yesterday, so I'm not going to retell it on our journey. But yes, it is going to be a vote getter. And it's one of those integration pieces that is going to be a big time for so many families in the province.
Brilliant. Okay. I hope we get to, let's talk about it more. But thank you, Richard, so much for joining us today. Your second check-in at Hotel Pacifico. I want to thank all of our guests also for joining us for episode 9 of our daily election podcast. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsors, Fortis BC and BC Dairy. We will see you Monday, guests. BC, you can never leave.
Checkout time at Hotel Pacifico. We hope you enjoyed your stay.